back to the Berg Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Dan
Hey, everybody.
and Ford.
Hey, how's it going?
And we're talking about accountability. We had a conversation recently, and we talked about the idea that we're experiencing a society where everyone deserves to be rewarded for everything, but not necessarily acknowledged for the mistakes or improvement that needs to be made. And this whole topic of accountability came up, and it's come up several times. So we're talking about accountability.
Yeah, we worked through this, and we honestly had a discussion like, how do we have this discussion, but to be open and everybody can listen to it, not just people at Berg, but also that people at Berg, that we get our message across, because it's an important message to me. And at the heart of the accountability piece for me is trust. It's that I trust that the people are going to go out and they're going to do what they're supposed to do. And I trust that we're all pulling in the same direction. We use the phrase inside the wire a lot, and everybody inside the wire has to be pulling in the same direction. And part of pulling in the same direction is knowing things aren't always going to go right. And when they don't go right, that the person takes responsibility and says, hey, this didn't go right. And then we can move on and we can improve, or we can get by, or we can make a repair, or we can fix it. But accountability, if we don't have that, all of the rest of our core values start to unravel, because you can't act like an owner if you're not accountable. You know what I mean? Like, I could do this with every one of the core values. You can't do that. Safety. You can't be safe if you're not accountable. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter which of the values or which of the things that we want to do. If you're not accountable, then you really can't do that. So, it is a central piece for us. It's really important to me. And it has nothing to do with like punitive punishment. It has to do with understanding what's going on and being able to continue to move forward because you understand what's going on. Ford and I have talked for a long time, and we've said it, I think it's come up on the podcast, where we say Ford and I are very effective communicators. Brian is as well, but the conversation was between Ford and I back in the day, and we're very effective communicators. What makes it difficult is when I don't know something that someone else knows. So if I'm trying to have a conversation with Brian, and I'm trying to convince Brian that this is why I believe we would need this piece of equipment, but I don't know an important piece of the information, it makes it much harder for me to convince you that this is a good idea, because I don't have all the information. So part of accountability is it provides the team the information they need to be able to make the best decisions.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting because I think often people hear the word accountability and they think discipline. They think judgment, right? And I don't think that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about the idea that some type of disciplinary action needs to take place because you're holding someone accountable for their actions. Accountability, I think, in my opinion, mostly means ownership. You take ownership of what you're responsible for, what you've done, what you're supposed to do, what you didn't do, but what we're required to. And that's a big difference. A lot, and the communication and information piece is so crucial. Think about the amount of time it takes to correct an issue when you don't know where the issue started or what caused it. If you can get to the root of what's happening and where something started, and a lot of times that's someone taking accountability and saying, this wasn't done correctly, or, damage was caused in this circumstance, or I forgot, right? You can a lot of times sort of assess a situation so much faster, take corrective action, and get people moving the right direction again.
Well, and it's really tough. We're kind of talking about this, but say there's an issue on a job site. You do your chain of command. You tell who needs to be told. They call the client. They say, hey, this is an issue, but this is the solution that we're going to provide you. The client's happy because you brought the issue forward. The teams, it should be fairly happy because you should be able to have a corrective action plan, but a new way of doing something going out of there. Flip that with nobody tells anybody anything. You get a call at 10 o'clock at night from a client that maybe has spent a couple hours out to dinner and a few other things, and they're just really got to their tea kettle is boiling to the top, and they're going to call you and ream you out. You don't know why they're reaming you out because nobody shared that information, and it becomes an adversarial situation, whereas, hey, we found this problem, here's how we're going to fix it. We multiple things we used to say. One was, if there's a problem, don't tell me the problem. The problem's already happened. Tell me 3 solutions that you think of that we might be able to figure out a way around that. The other thing is, tell me, I'm not going to throw you under the bus to the client, but I need to know so that we can figure out a solution to it. That's the main problem. We don't want it hidden, and then it just snowballs from there in a very unpositive direction.
Yeah, because we can take ownership of an issue as a team. We're not trying to single people out necessarily, right? Yeah.
No, well, you think about it. There's been whole industries really created on, root cause analysis and all these other formats that are all based on having a person to 3 people conducting investigations to get back to what you would have already known if somebody just said, "Hey, this happened. Hey, this is the situation." We're, I can think of a couple examples, where the one that really sticks with me for it, and we've talked about it, is we call it the big dig. It was this job, and we worked through, and I was confident that I had the approval to do something, and we did it, and we got to the end, and they were happy with what we did, but they weren't going to pay for it, and they wouldn't pay for it because I didn't have a clear enough approval to move forward, and I had to completely take ownership of that, and I didn't. I didn't agree with it. You know what I mean? I think that it was not the way I'd want business to be conducted, not how Berg is going to conduct business, not how we handle ourselves. But I had to take ownership with Ford and say that happened. Like that's my fault. And I don't think Ford even ever looked at it that it was my fault. Like he realized what had happened. But if you try and bury that, you make it harder. You know what I mean? The best you can do is just walk right into the situation and say, this is where we are. Because if we know where we are, then we can find a solution. But if you don't even understand the givens in the problem, it becomes very hard to move forward. And that's what we're about. You know what I mean? Every day we're about moving forward. Nobody comes to work and doesn't want to do their best on this team, I don't think. It's what makes us solid is that people want to come in and do a good job. They want to be proud of what they did. They want to, feel like they're owners. They want to, all the things that we take pride in and that we talk about. But at the center of it, we need to understand where we are every day and understand if something happens, what happened, and just deal with it. We've started using Clue, and it's been fairly effective for us. We're still working through getting it fully integrated and using it. But I've had this discussion over and over again. We have like 3 simple questions. The guys know. You check into Clue. Do you see any physical damage? Is the equipment clean? And how are the fluid levels? Really simple. You would naturally do it anyway, running any piece of equipment. But I've said to the guys, I just said it in a meeting with a couple of the guys at one of the teams last week. I said, this is not meant to like report that the machine is broken. I said, like, if you think about it, if Brian runs it on Monday and it's clean and there's no damage and it has fluids, and then Ford runs it on Tuesday, that should be clean and have no damage and has fluids. And if I run it on Wednesday, each day it would be the same. It tries to create a little bit of accountability by having each person sign off on it and say, this looked the way it should, because that you want it to look that way, and it rewards the next person, not like in a reward you get a trophy sense, but in the sense they get to operate in a piece of equipment the way it should run. And likewise, if something goes wrong, I just want you to use the system and enter it and say, hey, this went wrong today, and things happen. You know what I mean? I haven't seen many construction companies of any type of construction, but certainly in heavy civil, that the machines look like they did when I saw them at Komatsu's factory.
Right.
I mean, that's not how they look. It's not what the machine's for. It's made to run in rock and dirt and dig and bang around. That's the way it is. But if you can be accountable and you can care for that piece of equipment like it's your own, act like an owner, then we're all going to be better off for it. And it's really about that. It's about trying to give our employees the best possible work environment that we can, is why I want to do it with Clue. But if it's an estimator, project manager, labor, it's all the same thing. Just own your piece, do the best you can, and keep the whole team up to date on what the situation is so that we can all be accountable.
Well, and I think a tie to that real quickly is that there's a lot of experience in our team. There's people that have been doing this for as long as I've been alive. And, one part of accountability is knowing if you don't know something and being willing to admit that you haven't done this before. Maybe somebody else has. And that's what we always talk about, like teamwork and trying to like reach out to someone that maybe has already done this 10 times and you didn't know that, but you don't never done it. And so you're concerned, or you might have a challenge with it because it's a new thing to you. And part of that is like, hey, I don't have that information, but let me ask if anybody else does and see if somebody else can support you through that process. That'll keep down some of the issues that you might have. Because, when we started this years ago, part of what we did was hire people that had experience, because it was a lot cheaper to pay someone that had the experience than to learn it the hard way.
Yeah. Accountability a lot of times is seen, or can be seen as, a show of weakness, right? I had to acknowledge or admit I made a mistake, or acknowledge or admit I didn't know how to do something. And I think in other ways, accountability a lot of times can be viewed as confrontation. But when you boil it down, at least in the way we're trying to acknowledge accountability, it a lot of times creates a scenario that helps avoid confrontation. We don't have to get to a point where we're saying, who did this, right? Or who caused this problem? Because if you get to a spot where mistakes are acknowledged and taken care of in a timely fashion, then you don't have to get to a spot where you invest all your time in figuring out where the problem or who the problem originated with.
Yeah, you brought up a good point there when you're saying maybe accountability is not even the right word. Like I think it is, but because of the connotation, because of how we make it discipline, like maybe that's not what maybe we need to, think about a different word that we use for what we want. We had talked about it before this. I don't like when you like PC things and try and make up some other name that
Right.
that that glorifies a position or that does something. There's a big push right now to get away from the word labor in our industry and try and figure out another word because it makes people feel better, they think. And partly I don't love that idea because I think it's a little bit disingenuous, because I think that if you don't have a laborer, you're not getting anything done. Like, a laborer is a important person in our world. We don't have enough of them. We can't find enough of them. So to alter the name of that position so that people feel better about it, if a good laborer knows what they do, knows there's value and knows all those things. So that's important. And one of the things I was thinking of, Ford, a really good example, literally just happened yesterday, I believe it was, in a meeting. So Longwood wanted one of the NCONs, so one of the new tilt rotators. And so I said, okay, which one do you want? Talk to Scott Gardner. Which one can you give up? And Scott Gross said, okay, well, we're going to need somebody to come down and train someone on the NCON because nobody at Longwood has run the NCON. So I said, okay. And so first, right there, now you have accountability. You have Scott Gross, the general superintendent, saying, listen, nobody on that site really has a great amount of expertise with this machine. So immediately I said to Brad, let's get either Chad was the first one that came to mind. Chad's got, has experience in it. Let's get Chad free of his normal job for a couple days, get him to Longwood. He can do the work you need him to do, but also figure out who else you want to know how to run that machine that's down there, and he can train them on how it is, because otherwise you're just going to waste time, right? So on one hand, you'd look at, that's like admitting weakness. It's admitting people don't know what to do. It's, you know what I mean? But it's so key, because what you could end up with is the work done more quickly because you have the right piece of equipment there by a person with experience, and a couple people watch him do it and ask him some questions, and the next time they can do it.
Right. And it's hard in that scenario, right? Because Scott's thinking, how do I tie up two people to do one guy's job? But the reality is that once those two people both know how to do that job, it creates exponential value, because now they can both use that specific piece of machinery. They can both do those type of tasks, even if they're not in the same job. We don't have to wait for one person or two people to get to the right place.
What was the book? Was it Atomic Habits or something that talked about that? When you can do something that once the person learns how to do it, replicates itself, and it just exponentially pays benefits, and that's how training has to occur. And even with Ford was saying about, being the people are hesitant to ask. I mean, that happened when we were in Georgia, when we were down there, and the guys wanted to see me run a dozer, partly because they wanted to see me fail running a dozer, which is fine, because as Ford says, I don't really have to be able to fine grade a dozer. It makes no, if I was as good as Greg Petersheim, it would not help me to do what I have to do on a daily basis. And if Greg could be real convincing, it would not help him run a dozer. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. But I have to be honest and say, as I'm walking up to that dozer, I'm like, it's a brand new dozer. When was the last time I was in one of these? Do I know where all the switches are? Can I even get this thing? If I can get it to move, I can run it. But can I get it to move without on headsets, having to let all the guys know that I don't even know step one. How do you unlock the thing so you get it to move?
Yeah.
So I get in the machine and like, I'm looking around and, and I'm looking at all the buttons trying to figure out, because it's not simple. Like people want to make it that we're just a bunch of, dumb guys that move dirt. Yeah, I'm just a big dumb jock. I'm just a guy that moves dirt. And okay. And put an engineer in there. You know what I mean? Call up your favorite surveyor or engineer, have them come out and say, all right, get in the machine. Let's see you run that. It's not going to work because they won't know the very basic pieces. So I bring that up to say it's the same thing. Like accountability for me is that as well. Like when you get here and you apply for a job, it's really important that we understand where you are. Because I think as a company, we are willing to meet people where they are. If you are Greg Petersheim, that's great. We're going to meet you there. If you're AJ Gardner and you're in high school just starting out, I can meet you there. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. We can meet you where you are, and then we have reasonable expectations, and we can facilitate getting you the information you need to know what you need to know. But if people are not willing to be honest, and maybe that's what we need to start shifting to. Maybe I need to start shifting from saying I want accountability to just saying I want honesty. You know what I mean? I just want you to feel trustworthy enough, that you trust me enough, that you can tell me what's going on, and have that work out to every person in our company, that every person can tell another person in the company and honestly tell them where they are, what's going on, what they need. And if we can do that, imagine how much more efficient we could be.
Yeah. And it's like a full circle approach, right? They have to be willing to trust you, which means you've had to demonstrate that you're trustworthy, which, opens up the communication lines, and we can sort of get to the root of things quicker. And that process in and of itself builds trust, which builds honesty, and it kind of comes around.
Later today, we'll have some trust falls out back to figure this out quicker.
Let's see who we can really trust. Yeah, who's gonna catch me? I'm a big guy.
I don't think we should do it with anybody related to us, like no siblings, because you may just want to drop your sibling just on purpose.
Unintentionally.
You trust them all right, but sometimes it's more of a payback.
It wasn't a lack of trust. That was on purpose.
Yeah, and honesty is a good word for it. I think honesty. There's a lot of synonyms here, but honesty.
Yeah. Just because honesty has no
openness.
Yeah, honesty has no like discipline, no penalty associated with it. Like you're saying, like honesty is just being honest.
That's true, except for the people now use the word honest as a way to be. Every word now has a different connotation, but people say, "Oh, I'm just being honest" when they're trying to be
right, yeah,
rude or inconsiderate,
direct,
yeah, exactly. And so that's where. You're trying to find a word. We have to make a new word up. We're just going to come up with like our own like letters because of the problem that, if it's straight talk. That's all it is. It's just being honest, being straight, being whatever you want to call it. I mean, accountability, like you said, everybody, I don't know, accountability is usually like the getting called to the principal's office, but it's not that. It's just literally like, this is what happened. This is why it happened. We're going to do it different next time. Cool. Done. We're over. Move on.
Yeah. Most mistakes, not all, but most mistakes can be overcome.
A mistake, same thing as accident. Mistakes are usually not intended
you didn't
consequences.
Do it on purpose, right? That's different.
Yeah. Malicious, that's a thing when people do something wrong on purpose. But a mistake is just something didn't go the way it was supposed to. That's it. It's no bigger, no big, huge, problem.
As long as we're learning from our mistakes.
You do it 3 or 4 times the same thing. That's not really a mistake anymore.
There is a component there where you have to be willing to learn and correct and take action.
My 2-year-old daughter has that problem. She does something that she knows she's not supposed to, then she says sorry, so that means that it like washes it away. It's like, well, you can't be sorry if you keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. There's some merit to that statement. You can't keep saying sorry. Sorry doesn't make it better if you knew it was wrong.
Well, we have, social media. We have people out there like, oh, as long as you just apologize, magically everything's okay. And it's like, well, yeah, once or twice, but not forever.
Well, in social media, everything's perfect to begin with, right? So you don't have to apologize because it was always right. It
was always glossy to begin with.
Yeah. Well, once again,
we stayed on the rails here.
Yeah, I was going to say we're starting to wander here, but we actually
wandered near as far as some other times.
Pretty good for the most part. So yeah, but I do believe that that's a great place to wrap this up. We could probably talk about this topic for a long time, but thanks for joining us today, folks. We hope you got something from this conversation, and we look forward to having you again on another podcast.